The rain had already soaked through the hem of Sienna Martinez's trousers by the time she reached the side employee entrance of the Marcellus Crown Casino, and the digital clock above the loading bay door read 11:38 p.m. in cold blue numbers that made her feel even later than she was. Her heels had carved 2 raw blisters into the backs of her feet during the bus transfer across town. Her stomach had been empty since a vending machine granola bar at 4 in the afternoon, and the tote bag on her shoulder seemed to gain weight with every step. 3 past due notices creased at the corners, a folder of employment forms she had filled out in a laundromat, and the phone that held the last voicemail from her mother, like a glass object she was afraid to touch and afraid to lose. Inside, the first blast of air conditioning hit her wet skin hard enough to make her shiver. Outside was October rain and diesel and puddles reflecting neon. Inside was polished marble, amber light, velvet rope, and that sweet chemical scent casinos used to hide smoke and panic beneath perfume. She paused in front of a mirrored column near the service corridor and saw herself the way someone else might have. Thrift store blazer still damp at the shoulders, hair pinned back with 2 plain clips, makeup applied in the restroom at the transit station under flickering light, eyes shadowed by 3 nights of fractured sleep. Behind her reflection, men in tailored suits crossed the gaming floor as if gravity gave them better treatment than everyone else. The hiring manager had called this an opportunity for ambitious team members with schedule flexibility. The reality sat in her locker in 2 uniforms and 1 pair of backup flats. Cocktail service from midnight until 4:30, then cage reconciliation support from 5 until 9:30 if staffing held. A double role, night floor smile and dawn number silence. Desperation paid better than dignity. She had repeated that line to herself when she signed the paperwork and let the recruiter skim over the gap in her employment history without asking why her references were all dated 2 years back. The hourly rate was higher than hospital cafeteria shifts, and tips could patch what salary could not. Rent, electricity. Her mother's phone plan she still paid because canceling it felt like giving up. She swiped her temporary badge, took the employee elevator down, and stepped into the staff locker room where fluorescent lights flattened everyone into the same tired shape. A dealer in his 50s rubbed his temples while tying his tie in a small mirror. 2 housekeepers folded aprons with the automatic efficiency of people too exhausted to waste motion. Someone laughed from the far corner, short and brittle, then coughed into their sleeve. Sienna changed shoes, wrapped gauze around her blistered heels, and locked her tote in a metal locker whose door had a dent in the center, like it had been kicked once, years ago. Before closing it, she looked at her phone one more time. Mom. Voicemail. Saved. 027. She did not play it. She knew every breath in it already. She knew the way Elena's voice had lowered before saying, "Sai, if you can't reach me tonight, don't panic, okay? I found something at work that I need to check. I'll call you in the morning. Love you, mi vida." She knew the light traffic sound in the background, the click of a car door, the quick inhale that came right before the message ended. 16 days old. 16 mornings without a return call. Missing persons report filed and active, according to a detective who sounded apologetic but not urgent. She pressed the lock button, sealed the phone away, and shut the locker until the latch snapped. The corridor from the locker room to the staff stairwell opened into a narrow overlook above the main floor, and the casino unfolded beneath her with theatrical precision. Baccarat tables glittered like display cases. Slot machines pulsed in synchronized color. The central chandelier threw fractured light across marble tiles so clean she could see the reflection of ceiling beams. She had grown up in a 2-bedroom apartment where the bathroom fan rattled all night and peeling wallpaper curled off the kitchen wall in one long strip no tape could fix. Here, men who looked barely older than her dropped chips worth 2 months of her rent without checking denomination. At 11:57 p.m., she entered the service pantry and met the night beverage lead, a woman named Denise with a silver pen clipped to her collar and a posture that suggested she had survived every version of this room. Denise handed her a tablet listing assigned sections, pointed to a locked cabinet for backup linens, and spoke in a clipped cadence that balanced protocol with practical mercy. "You're Martinez? First night?" "Yes." "Floor is fast. Don't stop moving unless someone is in your way. If security taps your left shoulder, step back and wait. If a host asks for top-shelf comp service, you log it first, then pour. No free creativity. You get me?" Sienna nodded. "I get you." Denise looked at her shoes, then at her face. "You look pale. Eat something before the rush." "I'm fine." "Fine is expensive in this building. Go take 5 minutes." Sienna wanted to say thank you and did not trust her voice to stay steady, so she just nodded again and took 2 crackers from the break tin, chewing slowly while reviewing table numbers and aisle routes. Her hands trembled anyway. Not panic, she told herself. Low blood sugar, fatigue, cold clothes, too much caffeine from vending machine coffee. She counted backward from 50, the same way a counselor had taught her during the final month of her mother's divorce hearings years earlier. Her pulse eased by degrees. By 12:11 a.m., she was on the floor carrying a round tray with sparkling water and whiskey, moving between tables while music thudded through hidden speakers. The work required its own kind of choreography. Shoulders angled to avoid elbows, eyes scanning for empty glasses, smile calibrated to polite but not familiar. She was good at tasks that could be measured. Refill times, receipt logs, chip values in the cage reports she would touch in 5 hours. Control lived in systems, and systems were easier than waiting for a phone that stayed silent. Yet even inside routine, strain kept finding her body. Her lower back ached from standing. Damp fabric clung to her shoulder blades. Her left ankle twinged whenever she pivoted too quickly. At one table, a man asked for imported mineral water by brand and frowned when she took 3 seconds to confirm. At another, a woman in vintage diamonds accepted her drink without eye contact, then held out an empty glass as if Sienna had materialized for that purpose alone. None of it surprised her. Service work always revealed hierarchy with merciless efficiency. But tonight, every small dismissal landed harder because she had no margin left. Her checking account had $87. Her rent was 10 days late. The pharmacy had texted again about her mother's blood pressure prescription refill, and she had no way to transfer it without Elena's authorization. At 1:06 a.m., she found 30 seconds in a service alcove and drank from a paper cup. Room temperature water tasting faintly of lemon sanitizer. Her phone remained in the locker, and she felt its absence like a phantom limb. She imagined missed calls that were not there. She imagined Elena in places she had already checked. Shelter intake desk, county hospital, bus station waiting area, church office with fluorescent saints and stale coffee. Every image ended with the same unresolved edge, a blank where information should have been. Her throat tightened until swallowing hurt. She pressed her palm flat against the cool cinder block wall and forced herself to inventory facts instead of fears. Elena had worked auditing VIP junket files for a private contractor before she disappeared. Elena always called, even late. Elena had vanished 2 weeks after telling Sienna she was seeing numbers that don't reconcile. The police had logged the statement. The detective had advised patience. Patience had never brought anyone home by itself. At 1:43 a.m., Denise intercepted her near the baccarat pit and adjusted the stack of coasters on Sienna's tray with a quick, efficient motion. "Good pace," she said quietly. "You've got Dawn Cage too, right?" Sienna nodded. Denise exhaled through her nose. "Then hydrate now, caffeine later. Dawn's supervisors are brutal about decimal errors. I won't make any. Everyone makes one at 4 in the morning." Denise gave her a look that softened for half a second. Try not to make the expensive kind. When Denise moved on, Sienna glanced upward without meaning to and saw the mezzanine balcony above the main floor, the private glass rail lit from below. A man stood near the shadowed edge in a tailored black suit that fit like armor. He was not speaking. He was not moving much. He was simply watching, dark eyes tracking the floor with quiet precision as executives and hosts moved around him in deferential arcs. She recognized him from the framed business magazine cover in HR and from whispered staff comments in orientation. Luca De Luca, owner, rarely visible this late, unless something required personal attention. For one suspended second, she had the uneasy sensation that his focus had settled directly on her, not in passing, not by chance, but with the deliberate stillness of someone cataloging details. New hire, wet blazer, shoulders too tense. A woman carrying strain like contraband. The impression passed when a security captain stepped into his line of sight, but the feeling remained in her skin after she turned away. By 2:19 a.m., her feet had gone numb in alternating waves of pain and relief, and the music seemed louder than before. She completed 3 more aisle rotations, logged 2 comp requests, and caught herself reaching toward her locker key twice as if touching the metal would anchor her. She could not leave. She could not fail probation in the first week. She could not keep living in suspended grief while overdue notices multiplied on her kitchen counter. So she kept moving through marble and velvet and filtered light, carrying glassware with steady hands she had trained to obey discipline when emotion threatened to fracture. And somewhere above the floor, unseen now but sharply present, the man in the black suit continued to watch the house as the night pressed toward dawn. She took the next turn past the roulette pit with her tray balanced at shoulder height and nearly collided with a hand snapping inches from her face. "Water," the man at seat 3 said, not looking at her, eyes fixed on the cards as if he were issuing a maintenance request to the room itself. A tower of chips sat near his cufflinks, pale blue and black, enough value to cover her rent through spring. Not that bottle. The French one. Sienna shifted the tray, switched bottles, poured without spilling, and set the glass exactly 2 fingers from his right hand. "Of course, sir." He tasted it, frowned, then tapped the rim with 1 polished nail. Too warm. The table had been in play for 20 minutes. The glass had come from a chilled station less than 60 seconds earlier. She felt the correction rising in her throat and swallowed it. "I'll replace it immediately. Try to keep up." The dealer kept his neutral smile pinned in place, eyes moving between cards and commission camera. The 2 men to the whale's left avoided looking at her entirely. Sienna turned, replaced the glass, logged the comp code on her tablet, and kept moving while heat crawled up her neck despite the cold air. At 2:27 a.m., the floor manager intercepted her between Baccarat and the high-limit lounge, 2 dealers standing beside him as if this were a training demonstration. "Martinez," he said, stretching her name into something performative. His badge read, T. Lathrop, Floor Operations, and his tie was tied too tight for how much he liked speaking. "You're drifting lanes." "I followed the tablet route for Section B and C crossover service." "You followed slowly." He smiled at the dealers without warmth. "We don't do slow at Crown. I've met all response windows on the log. He leaned in just enough that only she could hear the next line. Then maybe your accent is eating seconds. One dealer looked at the table felt, jaw tightening. The other gave a short laugh that died quickly when Sienna met his eyes. She kept her posture straight, tray anchored on her palm. My accent doesn't change timestamps, Mr. Lathrop. His smile sharpened. In this building, we call me Trent. And in this building, you don't argue coaching your first night. I'm not arguing. I'm clarifying. You can clarify in writing if I ask for a performance note. The word landed exactly as intended. Performance note in week 1 meant probation extension, fewer prime shifts, less access, slower money. She thought of the 3 notices folded in her tote, of late fees multiplying while she slept in split hours. She lowered her eyes for one breath and gave him what protocol required. Understood. Good. Table 19 asked for a Negroni 5 minutes ago. Move. She moved. The tray did not shake until she was out of his line of sight. Her right wrist burned from compensating for the weight, and her left heel sent a sharp pulse up her leg at every pivot. The music seemed to throb through her ribs now, bass and brass and applause loops designed to erase clocks. She built herself a narrow tunnel of tasks and walked inside it. Garnish bin, cocktail rail, receipt scan, aisle turn, smile, clear, refill, log. Near 2:40, she was flagged again, this time by a hostess in a fitted navy jacket who held a tablet like a shield. Mr. Way says you crowded his elbow while the hand was live. I maintained 1 foot clearance from all seated players. Then he felt crowded by 1 foot. The hostess gave a brittle, apologetic smile that carried no apology. He requests senior service for the rest of the hour. Translation: removed from table after complaint, regardless of merit. Of course. The hostess tapped her screen, reassigned the table, and moved on. Sienna stood still for half a second while a suited server with perfect posture slid into her place. His cufflinks were engraved. His shoes reflected chandelier light. He nodded once in silent acknowledgement, neither smug nor kind, then began pouring with practiced elegance. Class contrast had weight in this building. You could measure it in fabric, in names people used for each other, in who could make a false complaint, and who disappeared quietly after it. When she returned to the service pantry for restock, Denise was checking inventory with a pencil tucked behind her ear. You got pulled from 19, Denise said without looking up. Yes. Lathrop? And guest complaint. Denise made a low sound that could have meant annoyance or recognition. 19 complains if the weather shifts. Don't wear it. It still goes on my first night profile. It goes on his profile too, eventually. Denise finally looked up, taking in Sienna's face in one efficient scan. Hydrate, shoulders down. We're almost at handoff. Sienna drank half a paper cup at the sink. Does he always do that? Who, the whale or Lathrop? Both. Denise checked the clock. One of them pays to feel obeyed. The other gets paid to enforce obedience. Neither one is original. Sienna let out a thin breath that almost became a laugh and didn't. That helps more than you think. I know. Denise capped her pen. And Martinez, if someone humiliates you in public, keep your voice level. People in this room remember composure longer than they remember facts. By 3:05 a.m., the floor had shifted into its slower, more brittle rhythm. Fewer tourists, more regulars, heavier bets. Sienna carried black coffee to a private table near the glass wall, then paused when a shadow crossed the marble from above. She glanced up and saw Luca De Luca on the mezzanine again, one hand resting on the rail, listening to 2 executives while watching the floor with that same still precision. He wore the same black suit, now with the jacket unbuttoned, as if the night had gone long for him too. One of the executives gestured toward the pit where Lathrop stood. Luca's expression did not change, but the executive lowered his hand immediately. Sienna looked away first. She had no margin for being noticed by owners. Owners noticed people when there was risk or leverage attached, and she had enough of both already. At 3:22, Lathrop called her over once more, this time beside a display of vintage whiskey under glass. "Shift split starts in 68 minutes, he said. "Cage reconciliation supervisor requested your intake at 4:35 sharp. If you're late, I log no-show for secondary roll." She blinked. "My orientation packet says 5 o'clock. Packet says a lot of things. Tonight says 4:35. Then I'll be there." He gave a satisfied nod. "Good. And Martinez? Smile less like you resent everyone. High-limit guests pay for atmosphere." She met his stare and answered with neutral calm. "I'm here to work, Trent." For 1 second his jaw twitched. Then work. She did, until the minute hand crossed 4:18 and Denise touched her elbow to release her to hand off. Sienna cleared her final tray, signed transfer with the beverage captain, and moved through the service corridor toward the employee stairwell. Her back ached in a solid line from shoulder blades to hips, and sweat had dried cold under her collar. Night shift had stripped her down to mechanics and will. The corridor to staff elevators ran along the loading bay wall. Concrete painted a tired beige, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Rain battered the metal doors in irregular bursts, louder now than at midnight. She could smell wet asphalt and motor oil every time the outer seal flexed. Near the side entrance, the old valet she had noticed during onboarding stood by the key cabinet, shoulders hunched inside a maroon uniform jacket 1 size too big. His name tag read Arturo. His hands trembled as he sorted key fobs, and when he dropped one, he flinched as if expecting someone to shout. Sienna stopped a careful distance away. "Mr. Arturo, I'm sorry. Do you have a second?" He kept his eyes on the cabinet. "Can't talk during dispatch." "There's no dispatch right now." "Then I'm behind." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small printed photo she had folded in a plastic sleeve to protect from rain. Elena at a street fair last spring, smiling into the wind, hair loose, hand lifted mid-wave. "Have you seen her? She used to come by for contractor audit pickups. Elena Martinez." His fingers tightened on the key ring hard enough that the metal clicked. He glanced at the photo for less than a heartbeat, then looked away toward the loading doors. "No," he said too quickly. "No, miss. I don't know." "She worked with VIP files. Maybe just in passing?" "I said no." His voice dropped. "Please put that away." There was fear in it, not irritation. Fear and something that looked like shame. Sienna slid the photo back into her pocket slowly, pulse stepping higher. "Did someone tell you not to answer me?" He swallowed. "You should stay in assigned corridors." The phrasing was too formal for a valet, too similar to scripted warnings. Sienna held his gaze for a moment longer, but he had already returned to his keys, hands shaking harder. A polished voice came from behind her. "Mr. Arturo, Doc B arrivals in 6. You're needed outside." She turned to find a high-roller host in a charcoal suit, silver tie pin catching the light. His badge read, "Julian Pike, VIP Relations." He smiled with perfect courtesy that never reached his eyes. "Ms. Martinez, correct? First week." He clasped his hands in front of him as if greeting a donor. "You're adapting quickly." "I'm trying." He tilted his head. Then, a professional reminder. Staff in dual roles should remain in assigned corridors between departments. Wandering creates confusion. I was walking to cage intake. Good. The smile stayed fixed. Then keep to that route. Arturo slipped past them toward the rain without another word, shoulders rounded against weather and whatever had hollowed him out. Julian stepped aside to let Sienna pass, and she caught a trace of expensive cologne over concrete damp. "Do you understand me?" he asked lightly. She met his smile with no smile of her own. "Yes." "Excellent." She continued down Corridor C toward the count room annex, badge clipped to her lapel, shoes whispering over waxed concrete. 30 feet ahead, a gray metal service door stood half an inch open, bright strip light bleeding into the hall. She heard voices behind it, low and fast, one male, one female, words too muffled to parse. As she approached, the voices cut off in a clean, unnatural stop. The door clicked shut from inside. Sienna slowed. A second later, someone engaged the deadbolt. She stood listening, breath held, waiting for movement, a chair scrape, a cough, anything that would make the silence ordinary. Nothing came. Even the fluorescent buzz seemed thinner here. At 4:29 a.m., footsteps sounded behind her, measured and heavy, then stopped when she stopped. She turned. The corridor was empty from end to end, just mop buckets nested by the wall and exit signs glowing red over steel doors. Rain hammered the loading dock 2 halls away, then eased to a hiss. She faced the service door again and saw a faint smear near the push bar, reddish against gray paint, the shape of a thumb dragged downward. Could have been wine. Could have been rust from wet metal. Could have been neither. She took her phone from her pocket, snapped one photo without flash, and saved it to a hidden album labeled Utilities so it wouldn't stand out if someone searched her gallery. Then she walked on to cage intake with her shoulders square and her pulse loud in her ears, already aware that when she came back through this corridor, she would check whether that door was still locked. She walked the last stretch to cage intake without looking back, though every nerve in her shoulders expected the echo of those heavy footsteps again. The glass door to the reconciliation office buzzed open at 4:31 a.m., and fluorescent light washed over steel counters, locked drawers, and 2 exhausted clerks finishing graveyard totals with the rigid concentration of people who knew a misplaced decimal could cost them a job. Sienna signed the transfer log with cramped fingers, clipped on the second badge for accounting access, and followed the intake supervisor through protocol she had memorized from training modules and practiced on scratch ledgers in her kitchen. Count sheets were checked in pairs. Variance reports were stamped in red. Any discrepancy over $500 was escalated to Operations Command. Her body wanted sleep and sugar and heat. The room demanded precision. Mara Klein, the reconciliation supervisor, pointed her toward Terminal 3. "You start with Baccarat carryover and VIP marker reconciliation. Keep your workstation visible. No phones on desk, no side conversations once totals post." "Yes, ma'am." Mara gave her a brief nod that was stern but not unkind. "You look like you've been dragged behind a bus. That means double-check every entry." Sienna slid into the stool, keyed in her temporary credentials, and opened the overnight export. Columns of numbers steadied her more than breath exercises ever had. Numbers did what they were told unless someone forced them not to. For 17 minutes, she moved line by line and felt the corridor silence recede. Then an error flag bloomed on her screen under a junket code she recognized from her mother's contractor binder, a code Elena had circled 3 times in blue pen 2 months earlier while muttering that someone keeps laundering noise through the comps. Sienna's pulse stepped up. She opened the trail. Manual adjustment at 2:03 a.m. Authorization tag RC17. Rafe Calder. The name sat on the line like a hand around her throat. Problem, Martinez? Mara asked from across the counter. Variance marker, Sienna said, keeping her voice level. Large adjustment tied to VIP transport account. It backposted against prior cycle. Mara walked over, skimmed the line, and exhaled through her nose. Escalate it. I thought operations had to sign first. Usually. This one gets escalated and time-stamped now. Mara tapped the monitor once. Don't editorialize, just flag. At 4:58 a.m., she sent the formal alert through the internal system and logged the transaction ID on paper. When she reached for the next file, laughter rolled in from the adjoining corridor, expensive and performative, followed by polished shoes crossing tile. Trent Lathrop entered first, tie changed, smug energy untouched by the hour. Beside him came Julian Pike, with his fixed smile. And behind them, as if the room had been built for his arrival, walked Rafe Calder in a charcoal suit with a pale pocket square and a face that could have sold trust to strangers. He looked younger than she expected, maybe early 40s, clean cut, no visible strain. His eyes were wrong. They moved like he was counting exits, not people. Mara straightened. Mr. Calder, we're mid-reconciliation. So, reconcile. His voice was easy, almost warm. I'm only here for the morning audit sweep. He turned then and saw Sienna clearly. Recognition flashed, then settled into interest. Martinez, he said, as if tasting the name. The new dual-role hire. She stood because everyone else had. Sir. Rafe's smile widened without softening. Your service notes are colorful. Trent gave a short, eager chuckle. She's still adjusting. Rafe kept his eyes on Sienna. Are you? He asked. She felt every gaze in the room clocking her posture, tone, breathing, waiting to see if she would shrink or spark. I'm meeting assigned metrics. Assigned metrics, he repeated lightly. That's very disciplined. Julian drifted to the side counter and pretended to review forms. Mara returned to her station, shoulders tight. Rafe stepped toward Terminal 3 and let his cuff graze the edge of Sienna's keyboard like a claim marker. I hear you ask questions in corridors that aren't yours, he said, polite enough that anyone listening from 10 feet away would hear mentorship, not warning. I asked a coworker if he'd seen my mother. His head tilted. Your mother? Elena Martinez. She audited VIP accounts through a contractor. For one suspended second, his expression emptied. Then he smiled again, this time for the room. This is not a family tracing service, Ms. Martinez. We all carry private difficulties. Professional boundaries exist for a reason. Heat climbed her neck, but she did not look away. Professional boundaries should include not blocking missing person questions. Trent shifted, clearly thrilled by the collision. Julian went still. Rafe's voice dropped half a note, smooth and devoid of anger. Do you understand the difference between concern and disruption? Mara spoke sharply from behind them. She filed an authorized variance escalation. That is not disruption. Rafe didn't glance at her. No one asked you, Mara. The room tightened. Sienna could hear the hum of the cash counter, the distant slot chime through two secured doors, the blood in her ears. Rafe plucked the paper variance sheet from beside her keyboard, scanned it, and gave a quiet laugh. You escalated this without routing through operations. Bold for probation week. Supervisor instructed me to escalate. He set the paper down slowly, then lifted the cup of black coffee from her station, as if he had every right. You know what happens to people who mistake suspicion for evidence? She held his gaze. "Do you?" The cup tipped in his hand. Coffee sloshed across her sleeve, her keyboard, the edge of her reconciliation binder. It looked accidental from any camera angle that mattered. The heat bit through fabric and made her flinch. Rafe stepped back immediately, expression apologetic for the audience. "Careful," he said, almost kind. "You're trembling." Trent was at his side with a napkin before she could move. Julian murmured something about facilities. Mara cursed under her breath and grabbed towels for the terminal. Sienna stood very still while dark coffee spread over the printed trail ID and blurred the ink. Humiliation hit first, then anger so cold it sharpened her hearing. Rafe leaned just close enough that only she could hear him. Missing women are often hard to find because they walk into rooms they don't understand. He straightened before anyone could register the intimacy and addressed Mara in his public voice. "Reissue the form. Ms. Martinez can restart entries after she changes. We value composure at Crown." He left with Julian and Trent orbiting him, corridor swallowing their shoes and cologne, and the polished violence of a man who never needed to raise his voice. By 5:14 a.m., Mara had forced Sienna to rinse her sleeve in the staff sink and return to a backup terminal while maintenance swapped the sticky keyboard. "You keep your head," Mara said quietly. "You hear me? Men like that feed on spectacle." Sienna pressed a paper towel to her wrist, where hot coffee had pinked the skin. "He did that on purpose." "I know." "Then why does everyone stand there?" Mara's mouth flattened. "Because standing and feeding children are linked activities for most people in this building. Finish your line items." Sienna finished them. At 5:36 a.m., after submitting the reissued escalation, she requested a 2-minute restroom break and took Corridor C instead, ostensibly for the closer staff washroom near Count storage. Her pulse had not settled since Rafe's whisper. When she reached the gray service door she had photographed earlier, the deadbolt was disengaged. The door stood open 4 inches. No voices. No light strip this time, only dim utility bulbs and the smell of bleach trying and failing to cover mildew. She eased the door wider with 2 fingers and looked in. A narrow staging room sat beyond it, stacked with banquet linens and broken display stands. On the floor near a rolling cart lay a torn visitor badge lanyard, a strip of silver duct tape, and a silk scarf with tiny blue flowers she knew down to the pulled thread at the edge. Because she had bought it for Elena at a street market the previous spring when money had been tight and her mother had pretended it was too pretty for everyday use. The scarf was dirty. One corner was stiff with something dark. On the cinder block wall above it, faint shoe scuffs streaked sideways as if someone had braced and slid. Her knees nearly folded. She crouched, hands shaking, and took rapid photos from 3 angles. Scarf, tape, badge, wall marks, door frame with timestamp in frame. She did not touch anything. She backed out, pulled the door nearly closed without latching it, and opened her hidden album to verify the images had saved. Then she forwarded them to a new draft email addressed to herself and typed 1 line in the body. Found 5:39 a.m. Corridor C staging room. Do not delete. Her thumb hovered over send. A shadow crossed the floor. "Ms. Martinez?" Julian Pike said from the hall, voice still polished. 2 security guards flanked him, neither wearing the usual floor insignia. "That room is restricted." She locked her phone and slipped it into her pocket. Restroom was occupied. "You took a wrong turn." "I found evidence tied to a missing person case. I need to report it." Julian's smile stayed put, but his eyes hardened. "You need to come with us to document your statement." "Here is fine." "Not here." He extended a hand toward the loading corridor. Private interview space. One guard moved behind her. The other angled toward the open hall, narrowing her options with quiet choreography practiced long before this morning. Sienna's throat tightened. The words private interview space hit like a siren because she had heard them once before, outside family court, right before her ex-stepfather had cornered her in a records room and explained exactly how people disappeared inside systems designed to look orderly. She took one step back. I want Mara present. Julian's tone cooled by a degree. Mara reports through operations. Operations delegated this to us. Do you understand me? She did not answer. Her badge lanyard had an emergency duress button under the clip, tiny and recessed, covered during training as a robbery protocol she had prayed never to use. She slid her thumb beneath the plastic, as if adjusting it, and pressed once, hard. No sound. No visible signal. Julian gestured toward Dock C. Now. They walked. She counted doors as they passed. Pantry, freight elevator, HVAC, exit. Rain boomed overhead where the dock roof thinned to metal. At the final turn, a black van sat idling inside the bay, side door already unlatched. Cold air swept through the opening and lifted the damp hair at her neck. One guard reached for her elbow. Her body locked for one heartbeat, that old freeze response surging up from muscle memory. Vision narrowing to the van's dark interior and the scrape of tires on a wet concrete outside. Then the dock exploded with movement. Step away from her. Luca DeLuca's voice cut through the rain like steel drawn across glass, low and barely contained. He came down the ramp in a black overcoat over his suit. 3 uniformed security officers at his back and a woman in compliance gray, carrying a tablet already recording. Lock Dock C. Kill that engine. Strip their badges. Now. Everything snapped into protocol. One officer yanked the van keys and tossed them to another. A second pinned the sliding door shut and sealed it with a steel bar. The guard behind Sienna let go of her elbow so quickly she stumbled. Luca reached her in 2 strides, moved her behind his shoulder with one firm hand at her upper back, and faced Julian. Explain, he said. Julian recovered fast, smile gone now. Mr. DeLuca. She entered a restricted room and refused interview compliance. We were relocating her for... Luca raised one finger. Silence dropped hard. You do not relocate staff off camera during active reconciliation. His eyes shifted to the 2 guards. You do not escort a probationary employee toward an unlocked vehicle. You do not touch what is under my roof without my authorization. The compliance officer read from her tablet, voice clipped. No interview request logged. No vehicle authorization filed. Dock C camera feed was manually looped for 6 minutes. Sienna felt the words like physical impact. Looping meant planning. Planning meant she had not imagined any of it. Julian's jaw flexed. Sir, with respect, this is a misunderstanding amplified by a frightened employee. Luca did not look at him. He looked at Sienna. Taking in the wet sleeve, the tremor she could no longer hide, the red mark rising where a hand had gripped her arm. His expression changed by millimeters and became far more dangerous. Medical to Dock C, he said without turning. And legal. Then quieter, to her alone. Stay behind me. She nodded because speech had abandoned her. Rafe Calder appeared at the top of the ramp as if summoned by chaos, tie-perfect, concern arranged on his face. What happened? Luca's gaze never left Julian. An unauthorized extraction attempt. Rafe spread his hands. That is an extreme interpretation. Is it? Luca finally turned, and the dock went still in that specific way rooms did around him. Your host, your guards, your looped cameras, my employee, my dock. Rafe's smile thinned. We can review facts without theatrics. We are reviewing facts. Luca took Sienna's phone from her shaking hand only after she offered it, opened the hidden album, and passed it to compliance. Add these to incident chain. Seal corridor C staging room. No one enters without investigators. Rafe's eyes flicked to the photos and back, a tiny crack in composure. It was gone almost instantly. By 5:52 a.m., 2 more security teams had the dock locked down. Julian and the guards were separated for statements, and the black van was being photographed from bumper to bumper under bright portable lights. Sienna stood with a thermal blanket around her shoulders because she had started shivering and couldn't stop. Luca remained between her and everyone else, giving orders in short, precise bursts that made the building feel less like a casino and more like a command center under siege. When the paramedic reached for her wrist to check pulse, Luca stepped back exactly 1 pace and said, "You're safe. Look at me." She did. "Breathe. In 4, out 6. She followed it, once, twice, until the edges of her vision widened and the dock came back into focus. Rain on concrete, red indicator lights, compliance tags fluttering from evidence bags. Men who had smirked an hour ago now refusing to meet her eyes. Her phone buzzed in compliance's hand as the emergency ping log confirmed timestamp and location. The duress press had gone through. It had called the only person in the building with enough power to override everyone in that corridor. Luca took the phone back, placed it in her palm, and closed her fingers around it. "You did exactly the right thing," he said, voice still rough with contained fury. "From this minute on, you do not walk this property alone." Luca kept his hand at the center of Sienna's back as he guided her away from the open dock and toward the interior corridor. And the pressure was controlled, not gentle. The kind of contact that told everyone watching she was not available to question, touch, or redirect. Behind them, his security chief, Brano, was already assigning containment zones and clipped commands that bounced off concrete and steel. Dock C stays hard-locked. Separate interview rooms for Pike and both guards. No shared counsel until legal clears it. "Yes, sir." Pull last 60 minutes from corridor C, dock approach, freight elevator banks, and staff stairwell. If a feed drops, I want the maintenance key history before sunrise. "Yes, sir." Luca didn't slow. Compliance gets first chain on physical evidence. Gaming enforcement gets duplicate packet. No one edits language. Sienna heard every order as if from underwater, words arriving through the pounding in her ears. Her fingers were still clenched around her phone so tightly that her knuckles hurt. The thermal blanket slid on her shoulders with each step, smelling faintly of plastic and antiseptic. Her wet sleeve stuck to her skin where the coffee had dried and chilled. She was aware of Luca's coat, dark wool and rain, of the way staff flattened against corridor walls when he passed, of how nobody tried to stop him now. At the intersection outside the staff clinic, he turned his head just enough to speak to her without breaking pace. "You stay with medical until I say otherwise." Her voice came out thin. "I need to keep copies of the photos." "You will." His tone stayed low, voice barely contained. "You are not losing evidence." The clinic door opened before they reached it. A nurse in navy scrubs stepped out with a rolling vitals cart, and a young doctor followed, tying back her hair with one hand while scanning Sienna's face, her wrists, the tremor she couldn't suppress. Luca halted at the threshold and shifted, so Sienna was fully inside the room, before he let his hand fall away. "Dr. Hahn," he said, "document everything. Wrist, arm bruising, cold exposure, stress response. Photograph with timestamps. Give her copy 1 and legal copy. I want it in her personal possession and in secure file." "Doctor." Hahn gave a short nod. "Understood." Any sedation requires her consent and mine. Sienna looked up sharply. Mine first. Luca met her eyes. Yours first. That one correction landed harder than the blanket around her shoulders. She nodded once. He turned to Brano, who had appeared at his shoulder with a tablet lit in white-blue rows of incident logs. Post 2 female officers at this door. Rotate every 30 minutes. Badge-in required for everyone, including me. If Calder asks for access, deny. Brano hesitated. He's still operations chief. He won't be by breakfast. Deny. The room went very still. Brano inclined his head. Yes, sir. Luca looked back to Sienna. Rainwater still traced the seam of his overcoat. But his face was dry, composed, carved into control. I'll be in the adjacent office. If anyone enters who you did not approve, you say no and they leave. Do you understand me? Yes. He held her gaze 1 second longer, as if measuring whether her breathing had steadied enough to process directives, then stepped out and shut the door with quiet precision. Through the frosted glass panel, she could see shadows moving, security shifting positions, Brano passing a folder to legal. No one raised their voice. No one needed to. Dr. Hahn approached with practiced calm. I'm going to check your wrist first. Tell me before anything hurts. It already hurts. Then we work around that. She nodded toward the exam table. Sit. By 6:07 a.m., Sienna had answered 14 clinical questions she didn't want to hear out loud. Dizziness, nausea, prior injuries, current medications, sleep in the last 48 hours. She told the truth because the room made lying feel useless. 4 hours fractured yesterday, 2 the night before. No dinner, 1 granola bar, too much coffee. Anxiety history, managed without medication since her mother disappeared because she couldn't afford another copay. Dr. Hahn's expression changed by increments as she wrote. Not pity, not distance. Something steadier. You're in acute stress, she said. And you've been running on depletion for days. I still have shift duties. No, Dr. Hahn said, not unkindly. You have immediate care duties. A nurse photographed the red imprint on her upper arm where the guard had gripped her, then her pinked wrist from the coffee spill, then the swelling at the base of her thumb from the sprain she had ignored since the dock struggle. Each shutter click felt like a record of things she had tried to minimize. Dr. Hahn wrapped her wrist, checked her pupils, and warmed her hands with chemical heat packs when she couldn't stop shaking. At 6:19 a.m., someone knocked once and waited. One of the female officers cracked the door, listened, then let a woman in compliance gray enter with a sealed envelope and a portable scanner. Ms. Martinez, the compliance officer said, I have your evidence receipt for Corridor C, Doc C, and emergency duress log. You can review before signing. You'll get digital copies now and hard copies when printing completes. Sienna took the envelope with stiff fingers. Her name was on the front in block capitals. Inside were itemized lines. Scarf with blue floral print, duct tape segment, torn visitor lanyard, wall scuff photos, dock vehicle images, camera loop anomaly report. Every object that had threatened to dissolve into rumor was now numbered, bagged, and anchored in a chain. She read each line twice. I want one amendment, she said. Her throat was dry, but her voice held. The scarf is not generic floral. It has a pulled thread at the lower edge and hand-stitched hem repair. That detail matters for identification. The compliance officer glanced up, then nodded and entered it. Added. Sienna signed. When the officer left, Dr. Hahn handed her electrolyte water and a protein bar. Eat both, slowly. Sienna peeled the wrapper with her teeth because her wrapped wrist wouldn't cooperate, and the first bite hit her stomach like a stone. She forced herself to finish. Outside the frosted panel, the silhouette she recognized as Luca's stayed near the door, never drifting far. The protective perimeter should have felt suffocating. Instead, for the first time in 16 days, structure felt like oxygen. 3 days earlier, she would have called this level of control terrifying. Right now, it looked like the only reason she was still inside a clinic instead of the back of an unlocked van. At 6:34 a.m., the clinic door opened again under protocol knock, and Mara Klein stepped in, hair pinned tighter than usual, expression sharpened by anger she was trying to hide. "You okay?" Mara asked. Sienna gave a brittle half-nod. "I'm here." Mara looked at the wrapped wrist, then to Dr. Hahn, then toward the door where Luca's shadow moved once and stilled. "I heard what happened at Doc C. I filed my statement." "What did you say?" "The truth." Mara crossed her arms. "That Julian requested private handling outside standard chain, that your escalation was valid, and that Rafe was in reconciliation less than an hour before the attempt. I also noted your coffee incident." Sienna stared. "Thank you?" Mara shrugged, but her eyes softened. "I like my decimals honest. Men who loop cameras usually don't like honest decimals." The nurse stepped in with a tablet. "Miss Martinez, legal wants to know if you consent to immediate interview in secure office with counsel present." Sienna looked toward the frosted panel again. Luca was still there. No pacing, no gestures, just waiting. She answered, "Yes, but only with my copies in hand." "Already prepared," the nurse said. At 6:41 a.m., she stood on unsteady legs while Dr. Hahn checked her pulse one final time and pressed a small packet into her palm. "Anti-inflammatory tablets, instructions, a clinic extension number. If your breathing spikes, you call. If anyone pressures you to continue duty, they call me first." Sienna managed, "Thank you, doctor." When she stepped into the corridor, Luca turned immediately, taking in the wrap, the steadier color in her face, the envelope clutched to her chest. He didn't ask if she was fine. He asked, "Can you walk?" "Yes." "If that changes, you tell me." They moved toward the legal offices in silence, flanked by 2 officers at a respectful distance. The corridor windows had lightened from black to iron gray. Dawn was pushing against the rain. By the first week of October, she had forgotten what it felt like to trust a room. Now each secured door they passed clicked open and shut behind them with deliberate finality, and every click sounded like one more line drawn between her and the people who had tried to erase her. The legal office near executive level was smaller than she expected. All dark wood, soundproof glass, and one long table with 3 folders already laid out in exact alignment. Luca waited until she sat, then placed a ceramic mug near her elbow. Chamomile. No caffeine. He must have ordered it before she left the clinic. "I don't want tea," she said. "Then leave it." He took the seat across from her, not beside, giving space that felt intentional. Brano remained outside with counsel and closed the door. For the first time since the dock, there were no medics, no officers, no moving shadows. Just her, Luca. The sound of rain diffused through thick glass and the pulse in her wrist under clean bandage. He spoke first. "You were targeted because you asked about Elena Martinez and because you touched a financial trail tied to Calder." Sienna leaned forward. "You said her name like you already knew it." "I did." Her breath caught. "Is she alive?" He held her gaze. "Yes." The word hit so hard she had to grip the table edge to stay upright. Relief came with pain, sharp and disorienting, followed by a wave of fury that made her vision blur. "You knew," she said, voice shaking now for a different reason. "You knew, and you let me keep searching hospitals and shelters, and Her throat closed. She swallowed against it. How long? 9 days. She laughed once, a raw sound with no humor. 9 days. I was confirming internal compromise channels, he said. If I moved you to her immediately, the leak that flagged your roots would have flagged hers too. You made that decision for me. Yes. The blunt admission knocked some of the heat out of her anger, because there was no spin in it, no attempt to soften what he had done. He didn't apologize first. He didn't justify with polished language. He sat there and took the impact. Start at the beginning, she said. All of it. No edits. Luca rested his forearms on the table, hands unclasped. Your mother was auditing junket reimbursements through a contractor that serviced our VIP transit accounts. She found duplicate vendor shells routing funds through entertainment comps and private transport invoices. She flagged 3 entries to her supervisor. The supervisor was loyal to Calder. Sienna's stomach tightened. That was the week she called me about numbers. He nodded. 2 days later, she was followed leaving a records annex on Harbor Street. She made it to her car. She did not make it home. My external security team intercepted the vehicle transfer before it crossed county lines. Sienna stared. Intercepted. Extraction under witness protection protocol, he said. She had a cracked rib, mild concussion, and signs of restraint. She refused hospital intake because she believed official records would expose location. She gave a statement to private counsel and one sealed statement to state investigators through protected channel. Sienna pressed the heel of her hand against her mouth, eyes burning. Alive. Injured, but alive. For 16 days, she had pictured dumpsters, riverbanks, anonymous morgue paperwork. Now the picture shifted to safe house walls, her mother in borrowed clothes, refusing pain medication because she hated feeling slowed. The shift was too large to hold all at once. She asked for me? Every day. The room tilted. Then why didn't she call? She did once, Lucas said. The call was terminated after 11 seconds by a signal anomaly on her burner route. That anomaly matched a location ping tied to someone in this building. After that, I cut direct contact until I had a cleaner map of who was feeding Calder movement data. Sienna closed her eyes briefly. The missed unknown call 2 nights ago. 11 seconds. She had been on the bus and thought it was spam. When she looked up, Luca had removed his suit jacket. The white shirt beneath was crisp but creased at the shoulder, as if he had worn it through the entire night. A pale line traced from just below his cuff toward his wrist when he shifted. Old scar tissue, thin and uneven. She noticed him noticing her notice it. Warehouse fire, 6 years ago, he said before she could ask. During an extraction, I didn't run fast enough. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not evasive. You lost someone, she said quietly. His jaw set. A sister. The word changed the room. He looked past her for 1 second, not at the rain, not at the files, somewhere farther back. She volunteered with a transit shelter. She documented girls being moved through debt contracts and fake job offers. She filed a report through the wrong office. They leaked it. By the time I understood the pattern, she was gone. Sienna felt her anger reframing itself, not disappearing, but acquiring dimensions she hadn't had before. Control was his weapon and his wound. He was overbearing because he had once arrived too late and never forgave himself for it. I'm not your sister, she said. His eyes returned to hers, dark and steady. I know. I won't be handled. You won't. He reached to the folder nearest him and turned it so she could read the top page. Then we do this your way, in writing. The page was a drafted agreement with blank signature lines. Immediate supervised reunion with Elena Martinez at secure site. Independent counsel of Sienna's choosing, paid through Victim Witness Fund, not DeLuca accounts. Full evidence release packet to State Gaming Enforcement and District Task Force with unredacted digital trails. Protective detail parameters requiring her consent for movement except active threat incidents. It was all there, line by line, the framework of agency returned. She read every clause. Twice. "If I sign this," she said, "I see my mother today." Yes. No reroutes, no delays for your internal politics. Yes. I choose my lawyer. Yes. And if this collapses because someone in your house leaks again, I walk straight to investigators with everything, including your delay. A muscle moved once in his jaw. Do it. By 7:02 a.m., the rain had softened to a steady hiss against the glass, and Sienna signed her name with a hand that still trembled, but no longer from cold. Luca signed beneath her in dark, controlled strokes, then slid her copy across the table and waited until she placed it in her envelope before he stood. Outside the office door, Brano stepped in with a secure phone and said, "Safe house confirms ready window. 40 minutes. Luca looked to Sienna, giving her the decision without speaking. She rose, shoulders aching, wrist wrapped, exhaustion pulling at every joint, and said, "Take me to her." Luca gave a single nod, then opened the door and shifted into motion so quickly the corridor seemed to rearrange itself around him. Brano fell into step on his right, one hand to his earpiece, issuing route changes in clipped phrases that turned elevators, stairwells, and garage access into controlled lanes. Sienna stayed close, envelope pressed to her ribs, pain pulsing in her wrapped wrist with every stride. Her body still carried the dock in fragments, the van door, Julian's smile, the grip on her arm. But another force pushed through the shock now, bright and destabilizing. Her mother was alive. The words kept colliding with disbelief until her throat burned from holding everything in. They bypassed the main executive lift and took a service elevator with matte steel walls that reflected them in warped outlines. Luca, in a dark suit, gone rain-creased at the shoulders, jaw locked hard enough to show strain. Sienna pale under fluorescent wash, hair escaping its pins, thermal blanket replaced by a dry black coat someone had draped over her without asking. The doors sealed, and for the first time since the dock, there was no cross-traffic, no radios, no procedural interruptions, only the hum of descent and the scent of rain still clinging to wool. "You're shaking again," Luca said quietly. "I know." "Is it pain or adrenaline?" "Both, and anger." She kept her eyes on the floor indicator. "Mostly anger. At me." She turned then, surprised by the precision of it. "You don't get points for accuracy." "I'm not asking for points." The elevator slowed. Her pulse tracked the deceleration. "You made me beg strangers for scraps while my mother was breathing somewhere under your control." Under the hard overhead light, his expression did not soften, but it shifted out of command mode into something barer. "I made a threat calculation. I chose containment over permission." "You chose for me?" "Yes." No deflection, no polished language, just the same blunt answer as the office. And the honesty made trust harder, not easier, because it offered nothing to push against except the fact that he believed his judgment outweighed everyone else's survival instincts, including hers. The doors opened to underground concrete and the cold smell of wet tires. She walked out first. 7 minutes later, they were inside an armored SUV, leaving the casino's lower ramp. City dawn leaking gray-blue through rain-streaked glass. Brano drove. A female security officer named Imani sat in the front passenger seat with a tablet across her knees, monitoring route cameras. Luca sat beside Sienna in the second row, close enough that she could feel heat through layers whenever the vehicle hit rough pavement. Distance in that car was measured in inches and in choices he did not make. His hands stayed visible, open on his thighs, giving her space inside a space that had none. Imani spoke without turning. Gaming enforcement acknowledged packet receipt at 7-Eleven. They're dispatching 2 investigators to secure Corridor C and Dock C chain. State Task Force liaison confirmed at 7:14. That contact is now active. Any movement from Calder? Luca asked. His counsel requested emergency access to operations logs and personnel interviews. Legal denied pending investigators. Good. Sienna stared out the window as they passed shuttered storefronts and bus stops, filling with people starting ordinary shifts, carrying lunch bags and umbrellas, and the fragile assumption that routines were neutral. She had lived inside that assumption until it broke. Now every intersection looked like a decision tree. Every sedan that held its lane too long registered as risk. Where is she? She asked. East River Recovery Residence, Lucas said. Independent site under medical supervision, not one of my houses. Who's with her? A trauma physician, 2 protective officers, and a case advocate she requested after the second statement. You let her choose that? I did. She gave a brittle exhale. You say that like I should be grateful. I say it because you asked for specifics. The SUV turned beneath an overpass, water drumming the roof in a hard, rapid pattern. She could feel him watching her profile, not intrusive, not detached either. And the awareness of it moved through her like another current she did not want and could not dismiss. Fear sat in her chest, sharp and practical. Attraction threaded beneath it, quieter and more dangerous because it arrived at the worst possible time. In his restraint, in the way he had listened when she corrected him in the clinic, in the controlled violence he aimed outward and never at her. She hated the chemistry of relief. She hated that her body noticed his steadiness as safety. If you hadn't reached Dock C, she said, what was your estimate? He didn't pretend not to understand. Of outcome? Yes. High probability of forced transfer. Low probability of immediate recovery without external visibility. With looped cameras, they were planning deniability. Her stomach tightened. And you still kept me working here while you mapped leaks. His voice dropped, rough at the edges. I kept you where my systems could still reach you. I was wrong about how quickly Calder would escalate. She looked at him fully now. You're not the only person in this city who can protect me. Then say who else has the resources and authority to block him today. Not ideally today, and I'll coordinate with them myself. The answer lodged in her throat because he wasn't bluffing, and because naming no one made dependence feel like a trap. That's not trust, that's leverage. It's both. He held her gaze. I won't lie to make it prettier. Imani's tablet chimed. She listened, then said, Vehicle in trailing lane switched twice since Canal. Plate flagged to Calder security pool. Brano adjusted the mirror. Confirmed. Dark sedan, 2 occupants. Luca's tone changed in an instant. Command cutting clean through the cabin. Route Delta. Notify precinct contact and task force liaison of active tail. Keep comms recorded. Imani transmitted. Brano took a sudden right, then another, threading warehouse streets lined with chain link and wet brick. The sedan stayed with them through 1 light, then 2. Sienna's heartbeat climbed, old panic trying to seize motor control. Her fingertips went cold. Look at me, Lucas said. She did, jaw locked. Name 5 things you see. She swallowed. Wiper streaks, yellow crane by the docks, red awning on that closed deli, Imani's silver ring, your tie pin. 4 things you hear. Rain, engine, Imani's radio, my pulse. 3 things you feel. Seat seam under my hand, the bandage pulling, you too close. His mouth moved, almost a smile, quickly gone. Good. Stay here. Police lights flared at the next intersection, unmarked but unmistakable once they blocked the trailing sedan into a curb lane. Imani exhaled and logged the timestamp. Tail contained. Local units engaging. Sienna watched until the sedan vanished behind them, then leaned back and closed her eyes for 2 beats. Contact made. Outcome confirmed. No rumor, no hand-waving. Procedure was holding. By the time they reached East River, the rain had thinned to mist, and the residence looked deliberately unremarkable from the street. 3 stories of pale stone, narrow windows, no signage. 1 camera dome above a recessed door. Inside, the contrast hit hard. Warm light, clean wood floors, a faint medicinal scent beneath coffee, voices kept low out of habit rather than fear. A woman in a charcoal cardigan met them in the vestibule and showed credentials before speaking. Marina Solis, case advocate. Ms. Martinez, your mother is medically stable and waiting in Suite 2. She requested privacy for first contact. Sienna nodded once, but Luca stepped in half a pace. Security status. Marina's gaze stayed level. Perimeter clear. 2 officers on rotation, 1 at stairwell, 1 at rear access. We did receive 1 unauthorized legal inquiry 15 minutes ago requesting transfer of witness custody. Denied and logged. Origin? Calder counsel. Luca's jaw set. Sienna felt heat rise through fatigue. He's still trying to move her. Marina looked at her, not at Luca. He no longer has legal standing over witness placement once task force designation is active. That designation is active? Sienna asked. Marina held up a printed confirmation sheet with agency seal and timestamp. Active at 7:26 a.m. Sienna took the paper and read it end to end, then handed it back. She was still reading when the outer door buzzer sounded, sharp and insistent. The officer at the vestibule feed stiffened, touched his earpiece, and said, "Unscheduled arrival. 3 individuals. 1 identified as Rafe Calder." The name hit the room like a dropped weight. Luca turned to Brano. "Lock inner doors. No entry." Sienna moved first. "No. Keep the vestibule camera and audio live. I want witnesses." Luca's eyes cut to her, assessing. "This is not a negotiation lobby." "It is if he's here to create a narrative," she said. Her voice shook once and steadied. "He called me disruptive in front of staff. He called my mother unstable in records notes. He wins when everything happens off camera. I want this on camera." A beat passed. Then Luca gave a short nod. Audio and video live. No physical proximity. Brano relayed it. They moved to the interior observation panel where one-way glass showed the vestibule. Rafe stood under recessed lights in a navy overcoat, umbrella folded, water beating on his shoulders. He looked composed enough for a board meeting. Beside him, a lawyer held a leather folio. Behind them, one familiar guard from operations kept his chin lifted in practiced neutrality. Rafe looked directly into the camera and smiled. "Mr. DeLuca, this doesn't need drama. I'm here to correct a procedural overreach and ensure employee welfare." Luca pressed the intercom. His voice came through the vestibule speakers low and even, anger braided tight under each word. "You're trespassing on a protected witness site." "Protected by whom?" Rafe asked pleasantly. By a casino owner with a conflict of interest and a talent for private prisons? Sienna stepped to the mic before Luca answered. Protected by a signed state task force designation and a chain of evidence record you can't wipe. Rafe's gaze shifted, and for the first time his composure thinned at the edges. Ms. Martinez, you're exhausted and being manipulated. Come with me voluntarily, and we can discuss your concerns with proper HR oversight. She laughed once, short and sharp. HR, you looped cameras and put me near an unlogged van. His expression hardened. Allegations from a distressed probationary employee are not facts. Sienna held the intercom button down, each word deliberate. Fact 1. I filed a duress ping at 5:41 and compliance confirmed response logs. Fact 2. Corridor C evidence was sealed with timestamp and photographic chain. Fact 3. Your counsel attempted unauthorized witness transfer 15 minutes ago and got denied in writing. The lawyer beside him leaned in, whispering urgently. Rafe didn't look away from the glass. You're making a mistake you can't reverse, he said. She felt Luca step up behind her, presence at her shoulder like a wall she had not asked for and was grateful for anyway. The mistake was thinking I was isolated, she said. That ended today. Rafe's smile came back, thinner than paper. You have no idea what kind of men you are standing with. This time Luca took the intercom. She has exactly that idea. His voice dropped another degree, barely contained now, a warning stripped of ceremony. You will not use her name. You will not approach this building again. She is under my protection, and any contact from you or your people will be treated as witness intimidation and charged accordingly. Rafe's jaw twitched. Possessive language doesn't create law. No, Luca said. Documentation does. You'll be served in 20 minutes. As if on cue, 2 plainclothes investigators entered the outer vestibule with badges raised, reins still on their coats. One addressed Rafe by full name and handed him a packet. The second turned to the security camera and stated the time, location, and notice type for record. External contact, documented outcome. No ambiguity left to weaponize later. Rafe took the packet, scanned the first page, and the mask finally cracked. Not panic, calculation under pressure. He looked through the glass at Sienna, then at Luca, and gave a small nod meant to read as composure. This isn't finished, Sienna answered through the mic. For me, this part is. The investigators escorted him out without touching him. His lawyer followed, speaking fast into a phone. The guard hesitated at the threshold, eyes flicking toward Sienna as if an apology might form, then lowered his head and went after them. The vestibule emptied. Rain whispered against the outer door. Inside the observation room, silence settled hard and clean. Sienna released the intercom and realized her hand had stopped trembling. Luca turned toward her, intensity still radiating off him in controlled waves. But he did not crowd her, did not claim more than she had granted. You changed that balance, he said. I know. He held her gaze. You did it well. Marina reappeared at the doorway, expression gentler now. Ms. Martinez, your mother is still waiting. Sienna nodded, suddenly light-headed with the emotional whiplash of confrontation and survival and proximity to the one thing she had crossed every line for. She looked at Luca once more, at the scar near his cuff, the rain-darkened suit, the man who frightened her and steadied her in equal measure. Walk me there, she said. He inclined his head, always with your consent. She absorbed the words, then stepped into the hallway beside him, past locked doors and warm lamplight, until Marina opened Suite 2 and Elena Martinez rose from a chair with a hand pressed to her mouth, alive and shaking and real. Sienna stopped on the threshold of Suite 2 because the room seemed to narrow around one fact her body had wanted for 16 days and no longer trusted enough to touch. Elena stood near the window in a borrowed cream cardigan, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other braced on the chair arm as if standing itself still cost effort. Her mother looked smaller. Cheekbone bruising faded to yellow at the edge, dark hair threaded with more silver than Sienna remembered. But her eyes were clear and fixed on her daughter with a recognition so fierce it broke the last of Sienna's control. "Mi vida," Elena whispered. Sienna crossed the room in 3 uneven steps and folded into her, careful of the rib injury and still unable to stop shaking. Elena's arms went around her anyway, one at her shoulders, one cradling the back of her head the way she had done after childhood fevers and exam failures, and that one night years ago when the divorce hearing had gone bad. The scent of antiseptic and jasmine lotion and wool filled Sienna's lungs. She cried without sound first, then with it, face pressed to Elena's neck, while her mother repeated her name in Spanish like a prayer stitched to breath. Over Elena's shoulder, she saw Luca stop at the door, then step back into the hallway and close it, giving them privacy without being asked. When they finally pulled apart, Elena touched the wrap on Sienna's wrist and the red mark on her arm, fear sharpening her voice. "They hurt you." "They tried to move me," Sienna said. "They didn't get me." Elena's jaw tightened, a familiar expression from unpaid bill years and landlord threats, and every time life had tried to corner them. "I told them in my statement. Calder uses transport logs as cover. I told them." She swallowed. "I kept asking to call you. I kept hearing no, not yet, not safe." "I know now." Sienna wiped her face with the heel of her hand. "I'm still angry." "So am I." Elena looked toward the door, then back at Sienna. "Anger can keep you upright if you aim it." A knock came, soft and procedural. Marina entered with Dr. Hahn and a man in a Navy suit who introduced himself as Special Investigator Cole from Gaming Enforcement, credentials presented first, tablet recording time, and participants. He did not sit until Elena nodded consent. "Ms. Martinez, Ms. Martinez," he said, formal but direct. "We need to close chain confirmations while details are fresh. You may stop at any point." He placed evidence photos on the table one by one. The blue flower scarf, now sealed and tagged. The torn visitor lanyard. The duct tape strip. The corridor push bar smear enlarged beside a reagent panel. Cole tapped the last image. "Lab expedited this because of active witness endangerment. The red smear was human blood, aged, and matched to Elena Martinez. Secondary trace on the bar was burgundy wine residue, recent, likely transfer from clothing contact in the last 12 hours. Rafe's staged cruelty and the old violence in Corridor C collided in one line of data." Sienna felt nausea rise, then settle as Cole continued. "The duct tape adhesive matches tape recovered from Dock C van cargo. Lanyard fragment links to a deactivated contractor badge assigned to Harbor Street Annex, where Ms. Elena Martinez disappeared. We have sufficient nexus for conspiracy and witness tampering charges." Elena sat straighter, despite visible pain. "And the valet?" "Arturo." Cole nodded. He gave a full statement at 8:12 this morning, with counsel present. He confirmed he saw Pike and 2 guards move you through Corridor C days before your extraction. He was threatened with termination and debt collection if he spoke. He is now under protective labor witness status. Sienna closed her eyes briefly in relief. The shaking hands had not been indifference. It had been fear under orders. At 10:03 a.m., as rain thinned against the windows, Sienna's phone rang with an unknown municipal number she almost declined from habit. She answered on speaker with Marina present. Detective Harrow, the officer who had taken her missing person report, spoke in a voice stripped of the earlier bureaucratic distance. "Miss Martinez, I'm calling to notify you your mother has been located alive and is under protection. Your original report is now reclassified to criminal abduction with multi-agency coordination. I should have pushed harder sooner. That's on me." Sienna looked at Elena, who squeezed her hand once. "What matters now," Sienna said, "is you keep pushing." Harrow answered, "I will," and gave her a direct line that actually reached him. By 3:40 that afternoon, they sat in a secure conference room 1 floor down, while independent counsel Nora Velez reviewed the signed terms Sienna had demanded at dawn. Luca remained outside the glass wall with Brano, visible but silent, taking calls he ended in clipped, decisive phrases. Inside, Nora read every clause aloud, then set down her pen. "Your autonomy provisions are enforceable. No relocation, interview, or media contact without your consent unless there is an immediate, documented threat. You also have restitution petition standing." She slid a second folder toward Sienna. "Seized funds recovery was approved an hour ago. Wrongful payroll holds and account freezes tied to Calder's network are reversing today." Sienna opened the folder and saw numbers she had not expected to see again in her own name. Restored checking balance. Back wages from withheld dual-shift differentials. Emergency victim fund disbursement. Not wealth, not fantasy, just solvency. Rent, utilities, groceries without triage math. She let out a breath that had lived under her ribs for months. Nora continued, "Operational outcomes. Julian Pike and the 2 dock sea guards were arrested on attempted unlawful restraint and evidence suppression. Trent Lathrop accepted a cooperation agreement tied to harassment and reporting interference. Rafe Calder was taken into custody at 2:17 p.m. on conspiracy, trafficking facilitation, witness intimidation, and financial crimes. Bail was denied pending flight risk hearing. Every external contact had come back with weight, on paper, in timestamps, not promises. When the meeting ended, Sienna stepped into the hall where Luca waited in the same dark suit, tie loosened now, fatigue finally visible at the edges of his control. He handed her a small keycard wallet and a folded sheet. "Apartment access. 2 codes you set yourself. Security protocol draft you can edit, not instructions you must obey." He paused. "And your mother's transfer order to the recovery residence she chose, signed by her and counsel." "You already arranged it." "I arranged options," he said. She chose." They rode in silence to the residential floor above his legal offices just before dusk, the city washed clean by rain and winter light. The apartment was modest by his standards and overwhelming by hers. Warm wood, stocked kitchen, locked file safe. 2 bedrooms so Elena could recover nearby without sharing space before she was ready. No hidden cameras in private rooms. Marina had verified and signed off. Sienna stood in the entry while Elena rested in the 2nd bedroom. And Luca remained by the door, as if waiting for permission to cross an invisible line. "I don't know what this is yet," Sienna said, voice steady despite exhaustion. "You and me. I know what happened. I know what you did right and what you did wrong." His gaze held hers, then set terms. "No decisions for me without me. No withheld information unless there is an immediate threat. And if there is, you tell me as soon as containment is done. I keep my own work, my own counsel, my own money. Protection is support, not ownership." He answered without delay. "Yes. If you break that, I walk." His voice dropped, rough with emotion he did not hide. "Then I won't break it." She studied him for a long moment, the scar near his cuff. The room's silencing authority he wore like a weapon, and the restraint he was choosing now in a small, quiet hallway where no one else could witness it. Fear and want and hard-earned caution braided together inside her. No longer confusion, more like a map still being drawn. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat of him, and touched 2 fingers to his wrist where the old scar disappeared under his sleeve. "I'm not a debt you're paying to your past," she said. "You're not," he said. "You're a choice I'm making in the present." In the living room, Elena called Sienna's name, stronger this time. Sienna looked back, then returned her attention to Luca. "Stay for tea," she said. "Then go sleep for 6 hours before you make another command decision." A quieter expression moved across his face, almost disbelief, then something like relief. "Yes, ma'am." That night, with Elena asleep behind a closed door and legal copies locked in the safe, Sienna stood at the apartment window and watched patrol lights make slow, deliberate passes below. The danger in their world had not vanished into fantasy, but the men who had taken her mother were in custody. The evidence was logged beyond private reach. Every warning sign she had tracked now had a name and outcome, and the silence in the hall was ordinary at last. When Luca came to the doorway to say goodnight, he did not step inside until she nodded, and when he promised, "You won't fight unseen again," she believed him, because this time the promise was written, witnessed, and chosen.